Imagine waking up one morning to find your security cameras missing, vanished without a trace. But when you check the footage, the culprit isn't some random thief. It's your entitled HOA president, smugly stealing them right off your house. What happens next? A jaw-dropping showdown, a shocking betrayal, and ultimate karma that no one saw coming. Stick around, because this HOA Karen is about to get exposed in the most epic way possible. Jake Carter knew suburban life came with quirks, nosy neighbors, overpriced HOA fees, and the occasional passive-aggressive lawn sign war. But he hadn't expected power outages at precisely 2:15 a.m. every night. It started the week he moved in. His newly purchased smart home, a cozy single-story with just enough yard to call his own, had flawless functionality by day. But like clockwork, at 2:15 a.m., the power would blink out for exactly 7 minutes before returning as if nothing had happened. His security system, Wi-Fi, and even the streetlights flickered into darkness before suddenly surging back to life. At first he chalked it up to a minor grid issue, an old transformer maybe. But after a few nights of the same eerie blackout, his curiosity turned into suspicion. Maybe it's haunted, his best friend Ryan suggested over the phone. Jake snorted. If it is, the ghost has a thing for electrical precision. But the real mystery began when he checked his security camera footage. The blackout disabled his cameras momentarily, but when they rebooted he noticed something odd. A shadowy figure would always appear on the edge of the street, just out of range of the motion detection spotlight. It wasn't clear who they were, but they lingered for a few moments before vanishing into the night. He was still staring at the grainy footage when his doorbell rang. Through the peephole he saw a middle-aged woman with a stiff blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard clutched like a scepter. She looked exactly like the kind of person who would start a war over someone's grass being half an inch too tall. Jake opened the door cautiously. "Hello." The woman didn't smile. "Are you Jacob Carter?" "Just Jake," he corrected. "I'm Karen Whitmore. I run the homeowners association here." She said it like she expected applause. Jake had already been warned about her by a neighbor, a retired veteran named Mr. Dawson, who had muttered, "Watch out for that one," when he saw her lurking by the mailboxes. "I'm here because I've received several complaints about your, decorative choices," Karen continued, gesturing vaguely toward his house. Jake blinked. "I've been here a week." "Yes, and in that time, you've already violated multiple HOA policies." He raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" Karen pursed her lips and made a dramatic show of flipping through her clipboard. "Security cameras, for one." She pointed toward the small but visible cameras mounted near his garage and front door. "Surveillance equipment disrupts the harmony of the community." Jake bit back a laugh. "That's funny. The listing agent told me security cameras were allowed." "They are, under strict HOA oversight," she countered. "You need approval before installing them. You didn't submit a request." Jake folded his arms. "Is that actually in the bylaws?" Karen's expression twitched as if she hadn't expected him to question her. "It's strongly recommended." "Right," Jake said. "So it's not actually a rule." Karen straightened, her lips thinning. "The HOA reserves the right to enforce neighborhood standards. And some people have found your cameras intrusive." "Who?" Jake asked flatly. Karen hesitated just long enough for him to guess the answer. He sniffed. "That's confidential." Of course it was. Jake exhaled. "Look, Karen." "Mrs. Whitmore," she corrected sharply. He continued without missing a beat. "I installed those cameras because I've had weird power outages at night. And someone keeps showing up on my street at the same time. That's why I have them." Karen's reaction was subtle, but Jake caught it. A flicker of something, discomfort, guilt, recognition, flashed across her face before she quickly masked it. "There's no crime problem in this neighborhood," she said a little too firmly. "If you're experiencing electrical issues, you should contact the HOA instead of jumping to paranoid measures." Jake frowned. "So you know about the outages?" Karen's expression hardened. "I know nothing of the sort. But the HOA will not tolerate unnecessary surveillance." Jake had zero intention of removing his cameras. Instead he said, "I'll look into it," with just the right amount of fake sincerity. Karen seemed satisfied enough. "See that you do." She turned and walked away, but not before glancing at the nearest camera with a look that sent a chill down Jake's spine. It wasn't disapproval. It was something closer to irritation. Like someone who'd been inconvenienced. That night Jake did something different. Instead of just waiting for the blackout, he stayed up watching live camera feeds from his laptop. He had a portable power supply to keep his system running if the grid failed. At exactly 2:15 a.m., the street plunged into darkness. His cameras glitched for a brief second, but the backup battery kicked in just in time to catch movement. There, in the eerie glow of the infrared night vision, a hooded figure crept onto his property. Jake's pulse quickened as he adjusted the feed. The person was moving toward the exact camera Karen had complained about. Then, to his shock, the figure reached up and began unscrewing it. The camera caught a glimpse of their face just before it was yanked off. Jake froze. Even in the grainy night vision, the outline was unmistakable. It was Karen. Jake's mind raced as he stared at the paused frame on his laptop. The hooded figure, no doubt in his mind now, was Karen Whitmore, the self-appointed dictator of the HOA, caught red-handed as she stole his security camera in the dead of night. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling a slow, disbelieving breath. This wasn't some random vandal. This wasn't a bored teenager messing around. This was the woman who had just lectured him about the so-called intrusiveness of his cameras. And now she was out here, creeping onto his property and stealing them herself. Jake shook his head, half in amusement, half in exasperation. What kind of HOA president does this? Then a thought struck him. Karen wasn't just complaining about his security system. She wanted it gone. And if she was going to these lengths to remove his cameras, it meant she had something to hide. The perfect trap. Jake wasn't about to confront her immediately, not when he had the chance to catch her even more blatantly. If she was dumb enough to steal one, she'd probably try again. And Jake was more than ready for that. The next morning he headed straight to a local electronics store and bought 2 new security cameras. Only these weren't just regular cameras. They were decoys. Small, cheap, battery-operated models that looked real but didn't actually record anything. He installed them in the same spots where the stolen ones had been, making sure they were just as noticeable. The real surprise, however, was the hidden camera he installed in a less obvious location. One that Karen wouldn't think to look for. He angled it perfectly, ensuring that when she came back for round 2, she'd be caught in full detail with no chance of denial. Now all he had to do was wait. Karen strikes again. That night, Jake stayed up once more watching the live feeds. Sure enough, at exactly 2:15 a.m. the streetlights blinked out. Jake didn't flinch. He had already plugged his system into a backup power supply, ensuring that this time, everything stayed online. He watched in real time as the familiar hooded figure emerged once again. Karen moved with surprising speed and confidence, as if she'd done this 100 times before. She approached the decoy cameras, pulling a tiny screwdriver from her oversized handbag, because apparently even when committing a crime she needed to look fashionable. With the same smug efficiency as the night before, she began unscrewing the first camera, stuffing it into her bag. Jake leaned forward, grinning. Hook, line, and sinker. But then she did something unexpected. Instead of just taking the cameras and leaving, Karen reached into her bag and pulled out what looked like a small remote control. She pointed it at the electrical box on the street corner. A second later, the power surged back on. Jake's grin disappeared. Wait, was Karen causing the blackouts? The shocking discovery. Jake immediately began searching online, cross-referencing electrical schematics and remote control jammers. And sure enough, he found exactly what he suspected. Karen had some kind of device that could manually trip the power relay, effectively cutting power to his home, and likely the surrounding area, for a short, controlled period. She hadn't just been stealing his cameras. She had been disabling them first. Jake's stomach twisted. This wasn't just an annoying HOA feud anymore. This was premeditated tampering with city infrastructure. And if Karen was willing to illegally kill the power to avoid getting caught, what else was she hiding? The next morning, a confrontation in disguise. The following morning, Jake waited outside his house, sipping coffee casually, watching as Karen sauntered down the sidewalk like she hadn't just committed a crime. The moment their eyes met, she paused. Then she smiled. Smugly. Jake fought the urge to roll his eyes. She really thinks she got away with it. Good morning, Jake, she said smoothly. I hope you've reconsidered our little discussion about those, she gestured vaguely, unnecessary security cameras. Jake took a slow sip of coffee. Oh, I don't know, Karen. I'm actually thinking about installing more. Her smile twitched. Jake continued. You know, I had some trouble last night. Would you believe it? Someone stole my security cameras. Karen gasped dramatically. Oh dear. That's terrible. It really is, Jake said, watching her carefully. Funny thing though, I managed to catch the thief on camera. Karen froze. For just a fraction of a second her polished facade cracked. Then she forced a laugh. Oh, you poor thing. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Jake smiled. Oh, I don't think so. The video's pretty clear. Karen shifted uncomfortably. Well, I'm sure the HOA would be happy to investigate. Jake set his coffee down. No need. I've already got a meeting with the police. Panic mode activated. Karen's entire demeanor changed. Her posture stiffened, her expression darkened, and for the first time she looked genuinely afraid. You wouldn't want to cause unnecessary drama, would you? She said, her voice laced with warning. Jake chuckled. Oh, Karen, I think you've already done that for me. Karen whirled around and stormed off, her usual composed stride turning into a frantic power walk back to her house. Jake watched her go, shaking his head. She thought she still had some control over this situation. But she had no idea what was coming next. Because Jake wasn't just going to turn the footage over to the police. He was going to expose her in front of the entire HOA. And this time, Karen wouldn't have anywhere to hide. Jake didn't waste time. The moment Karen scurried off like a guilty raccoon, he forwarded the security footage to the local police department. His lawyer friend Mark had already assured him that tampering with someone's personal property, and more importantly disrupting public utilities, was a serious offense. But Jake wasn't satisfied with just a quiet legal process. He wanted everyone in the HOA to see exactly who Karen was. And the perfect opportunity? The upcoming HOA meeting. The HOA meeting showdown. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a pristine building that Karen treated like her own personal kingdom. Jake arrived early, taking a seat near the front while Karen, smug and oblivious, stood near the podium, gossiping with her inner circle of HOA loyalists, a group of equally self-important suburbanites who lived to police grass height and mailbox colors. The meeting began with boring agenda points, a discussion about fence height regulations, followed by a 30-minute rant from one homeowner about someone parking too close to the curb. Jake patiently waited as Karen cleared her throat dramatically. And now onto a very serious issue, she announced, flipping through her notes. We have had a troubling case of rule-breaking in our community. Specifically, a homeowner who has refused to comply with HOA regulations and has created an unsafe environment with unauthorized security cameras. Jake's lips twitched. Well, this is going to be good. Karen continued. After receiving multiple complaints, I believe it is in the HOA's best interest to issue a fine and demand the immediate removal of all surveillance equipment that does not meet community standards. She looked directly at Jake, her smug smile practically screaming, I win. Jake casually leaned forward. Before we vote on that, Karen, I think everyone should see something first. She blinked. Excuse me. Jake pulled out a USB drive and handed it to the HOA's tech guy, an elderly man named Frank who was more than happy to comply, especially since he had been at odds with Karen for years. The projector screen flickered to life. The video that changed everything. The footage began playing. At first it showed Jake's property at night, calm and still. Then, just as he knew it would, the power blinked out. Karen's expression faltered. A few murmurs ran through the room. And then, there she was. Karen Whitmore, creeping onto Jake's property, reaching up and unscrewing the cameras like a common thief. Gasps filled the room. Wait, is that Karen? Someone whispered. Oh my God. That's illegal. But the real bombshell came when the footage showed Karen using her mysterious remote device to manually shut off the power. At this, even the HOA loyalists looked horrified. Someone in the back burst out laughing. Jake turned to Karen. So, Karen, would you like to explain why the HOA president is committing theft and tampering with city utilities? Karen's entire face drained of color. This is slander, she stammered. This is completely fake. Jake pulled out his laptop, waving it. You can say that all you want, but I have the original files backed up. And guess what? So do the police. The room exploded into chatter. What the hell, Karen? You shut off the power? Is that why my lights kept flickering? Karen spun toward her inner circle, but even they were edging away from her, unwilling to go down with the ship. Seeing no allies left, Karen did what Karen always did, she lied. I was protecting the neighborhood, she declared, lifting her chin. Jake's cameras were an invasion of privacy. They were pointed at people's homes. I was simply removing illegal surveillance. A woman in the front row, Mrs. Dawson, snorted. That's funny, Karen, because I installed cameras 2 months ago after someone stole my garden gnome, and you never said a word about those. Karen floundered. Well, Jake crossed his arms. Also, how exactly does shutting off the power protect the neighborhood? Silence. Everyone was watching Karen now, eyes narrowed, waiting for an explanation that didn't exist. The HOA turns against her. The HOA president, a man named Greg, stood up and adjusted his glasses. Karen, he said slowly, do you have any explanation for this? Karen opened and closed her mouth like a fish gasping for air. Then, realizing she had nowhere left to turn, she did what no one expected. He went on the attack. This is all his fault, she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at Jake. He moved in and started ruining everything. He doesn't respect the community's vision. Oh, give it a rest, Karen, someone muttered. Yeah, another woman added. You broke the law. Karen whipped around, panicked. This is an outrage. I have done more for this community than anyone else. I have spent years making sure everything is perfect. Jake smirked. And how much of the HOA's budget have you spent on your own house, Karen? The room fell into an eerie silence. Karen's eyes widened in sheer panic. Wait, what does he mean? One of the board members asked. Jake casually leaned back. Oh, just that I did some digging and it turns out the HOA budget has been paying for Karen's landscaping, her driveway repaving, and, get this, even her pool cleaning. At that moment, Karen knew it was over. Greg turned to her, his face cold and furious. Karen, you're officially removed from the HOA board effective immediately. You can't do this, she screeched. Oh, we absolutely can, he snapped. And I'll be recommending legal action for both the theft and the misuse of funds. The entire room burst into applause. Karen sputtered, her face twisting into something between rage and disbelief. Then, realizing she had completely lost, she grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the clubhouse door so hard that the welcome sign fell off the wall. Jake grinned. Justice? Served. But the best part? He wasn't done yet. Karen stormed out of the HOA meeting like a tornado in heels, her face red with humiliation, her reign of terror officially over. But for Jake, the fallout had only just begun. The moment she left, the clubhouse erupted into chatter. Half the homeowners were still in shock that their longtime self-proclaimed leader had been stealing money and tampering with security cameras, while the other half was too busy celebrating her downfall. Jake leaned back in his chair, watching the chaos unfold with a satisfied smirk. Man, Ryan's voice crackled through his earpiece. He had been listening in on the meeting via a live stream from Jake's laptop. That was even better than I imagined. Jake chuckled. Told you it'd be worth the setup. But Karen wasn't going down without a fight. As Jake exited the clubhouse, he barely made it to his driveway before his phone buzzed. An unknown number. Jake answered, already suspecting who it was. You're going to regret this. Yep. Karen. Wow, Jake said dryly. You switched to full villain monologue mode fast. This isn't over, she hissed. I have connections. Do you think you can humiliate me and get away with it? I will see to it that you're... Jake hung up mid-threat. He wasn't stupid enough to entertain Karen's delusions. Instead, he set up one final trap. The final nail in the coffin. The next morning, Jake installed a brand new top-of-the-line security system, one that Karen couldn't touch because it had a backup generator in case she tried to pull her power trick again. It live-streamed directly to cloud storage. And most importantly, it had motion-triggered audio alerts. Jake customized one alert specifically for Karen. That night at exactly 2:15 a.m., the streetlights blinked out again, but Jake's system stayed fully operational. And sure enough, there she was. Karen, dressed in all black, creeping onto his property one last time. Jake watched from his phone as she reached up to steal the replacement camera. That's when the automated audio alert blasted through the speakers. Smile, Karen. You're on camera. Again. Karen froze mid-theft, looking up horrified as her own name echoed through the quiet street. Then before she could run, the streetlights snapped back on. And waiting at the end of Jake's driveway? 2 police officers. Karen's arrest. Karen didn't even try to run, she just stood there, caught red-handed, her face an absolute portrait of defeat. One of the officers, a burly man with a tired expression, sighed. "Ma'am, we've already been forwarded the security footage. You're under arrest for trespassing, theft, and tampering with public utilities." Karen whipped around to Jake, eyes blazing. "You set me up." Jake grinned. "You made it easy." As the officers cuffed her, Karen launched into a full meltdown. "This is illegal. I have rights. I'm going to SU." "No, you're going to jail," the officer corrected dryly, guiding her toward the squad car. Jake casually waved. "Make sure she gets a nice cell with a view." As Karen screamed threats that no one cared about, the squad car's door slammed shut, and the vehicle drove off into the night. The aftermath: HOA rebellion. The very next morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. Word spread fast. Karen had been arrested, charged, and officially banned from the HOA. And without their dictator, the HOA crumbled almost immediately. The budget fraud investigation revealed Karen had embezzled thousands from the community funds. Several neighbors came forward with their own horror stories. How Karen had fined them for made-up violations and bullied elderly residents into paying fees that didn't exist. The new HOA president, Greg, immediately abolished most of Karen's ridiculous rules, including the ban on security cameras. By the end of the week, nearly half the homeowners had installed their own security systems. Jake, enjoying the irony, even helped Mr. Dawson install a set of cameras, just in case Karen ever tried a comeback. Karen's pathetic attempt at revenge. Of course, Karen wasn't done embarrassing herself. A few weeks later, she resurfaced, this time filing a defamation lawsuit against Jake. It lasted exactly 1 court session. The judge, after reviewing the evidence, laughed her out of the courtroom. Karen was ordered to pay legal fees for wasting the court's time. And to make things even sweeter, she lost her real estate license due to fraud allegations uncovered during the investigation. Jake's final victory. With Karen gone for good, the neighborhood transformed overnight. Gone were the ridiculous fines, the constant threats, and the HOA tyranny. And in their place, Jake hosted a block party, one that Karen never would have allowed. Music blasted, grills fired up, and neighbors who had spent years living in fear finally got to relax and enjoy their community. As Jake stood near his porch watching people laugh and celebrate, Ryan clapped him on the back. "Dude," he said, grinning, "you single-handedly took down a Karen dictatorship." Jake smirked. "And I got it all on video." Then, in one final act of poetic justice, Jake unveiled his last gift to the neighborhood. A brand new security camera, mounted right in front of his house. Except this one had a special sign beneath it. In bold capital letters it read, "Smile Karen. You're on camera." The entire block roared with laughter. If you enjoyed this wild ride of HOA drama, entitled behavior, and ultimate karma, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more insane real-life stories. Speech Balloon, tell us in the comments, what's the most ridiculous HOA rule you've ever heard of? Have you ever dealt with a Karen like this? Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story where justice gets served. Fire. And if you love watching entitled people get what they deserve, stick around, because we've got plenty more jaw-dropping tales coming your way. Rocket subscribe now and become part of the Entitled People community. You won't regret it. And with that, peace was officially restored.